Hello, everybody. Happy New Year. Right, let me see if I can get all the cameras sorted and pointing in the right place. My phone is being. There we go. So the phone one has been particularly awkward today, but I think we're just about there. Okay. Oh, feels weird to be doing this in the afternoon, because normally these are morning activities. So it's like, oh, I've just had lunch, and I'm kind of like my brain's gone to sleep, and it's the first dyeing that I've done this year as well. So it's all like everything's not quite right, but we shall survive. Right, let me see if I can persuade this glove to turn back the right way around, because I couldn't get the phone to work whilst I was wearing it. So I've not done great. I was really busy for most of the morning packing up all the orders to go into the post that have come in over the Christmas holidays, because we've not sent anything out since the 21st of December. So there were quite a lot of stuff piled up, sat waiting to be sent out. All the postmen came about half an hour ago and picked those up. So they are now all on the way. So that sort of backlog cleared, and I had to send out some things. I'm teaching an online workshop for a guild in a couple of weeks' time, so they need their materials posting out. It's been a busy morning, but I've just topped up a few of the Colours of Cambria and the Textile Heritage packs that had sold out over the holidays, and they're quite good. It doesn't take a great deal amount of time, and because they're sort of reliant on recipes, they're kind of quite a good way of easing back into things. But hopefully I've got enough of my brain and gear to come up with something new for this month's Seasonal Changes pack. There is some of last month's pack still available, and the winner this time was Aurora, which thankfully the Fellowship of Yarn, the company that I used to host that, their systems went down first thing this morning. I don't know whether they were running updates or just whether something went wrong. I was like, oh, well, that's going to be a bit of a problem, because I'm going to have to go back and reverse find the picture to use as inspiration. But we've got there eventually, because it did come back and start working first thing this morning. Right, just persuade my iPad to connect to the Wi-Fi in here, not the one in the house, because at the moment I haven't got the picture on my iPad because it's not done the magic cloud thingy. Where you go. Oh, there we go. Right, that should pull that through, so I can show you the picture of what we're dyeing. And sort of, although I kind of roughly know what it is in my head, it's always nice to have it in front of us. Oh, my iPad's going, no, don't like you anymore. Why are you doing this to me? Photos. There we go. Thank you. Love technology. So we're doing this one here. So that's on YouTube, and that one's on here. So remember, this is the camera looking at the screen of my iPad. So the colours are always a bit. And when a few people picking this one are like, oh, I really like the colours, but it's all really dark and gloomy, and there's this lovely bright green in the picture, because I don't do the colour palette at the bottom, and I basically go and search for colour palettes that I think would work for fibre, or that are different enough to pass the last month, that they're going to give me a nice variety to stock, because the last thing I want to do is sell the same variations of colours over and over again, because not everybody likes every single colour, which is shocking, I know, but some people are like, oh no, it's got too much yellow in it, I don't like it this month, so they don't buy one, which is fair enough, but it means that I need to kind of keep swapping and changing what we do. So I'm going to swap and change the colours in this one, and we are going to put some of that brighter green in it, because when I'm coming up with these colour palettes, the thing I always try to do is make sure that we've got enough contrast, so that if you want to use them for colour work like this, and these are leftover random bits of Shetland that I dyed years and years ago that I've worked my way, and they got turned into this mishmash of every single colour jumper. And you need to have not just contrasting colours, but contrasting tonal values. So they need to look like they're different shades of grey when you look at them in black and white. And if you don't have that, your colour work motifs or your stripes don't show up. So that's what I always try and come up with when we're doing colours. But I am going to keep these very darkest colours on the side here, because actually we've been a bit lacking in really, really dark colours. So to dye that first one, it's kind of like a petrol-y navy blue. So it's very darkest colour on here. For any of you who have not joined me with these sessions before, I don't run them so much as this is exactly how to dye fibre, because I have an online course that's devoted to that. But they are sort of me talking through my thought process in my head out loud. It's a slightly scary place to be sometimes. So let's have a look at what we've got in here. I need to grab the kitchen roll. So when I'm testing out colour development, I always basically dot the colours onto a piece of kitchen roll. Let's clean that off, as a very good way to see what sort of colour we've got, because you're looking at that in a container and going, could be any colour. We're dyeing onto creamy white fibre, so this starts to give us a very good hint as to what we're going to end up with, and that's going to be about right. I'm going to keep it slightly bluer than in the original inspiration image, because that's going to give us more contrast with the purples and the greens. It'd be very easy with this colour palette to end up with everything looking far too much the same. Right, 50 royal, 50 black. And remember to write them down, because once I've dyed up this first pack, I will then carry on dyeing this set of colours throughout the rest of the month. They'll only be available during January, or the stock will only be dyed in January, and then once they've all sold out, that's it, because we move on to the next month's colour. So it's kind of like a fibre club, but not quite. So we've done our first colour. The next colour we've got going along is this darker purple. So I'm going to keep that as another dark colour. So that is going to be our nice dark shade of purple, because that's going to work quite nicely sort of as another relatively tonal dark. So again, I'm going to go to the black. So the black dye that I use, I know, has got lots of purple undertones to it. Then we're going to use this is a grey dye that's very blue toned. So in order to make it into purple, we need to add something in the red colour vibe. Let me write down what I've put in so far. Right. And we're going to take a look at this. I think I might have ended up with something that's a little bit too red, but that's relatively easy to fix. Let's have a look. It's kind of it's not far off. And again, the camera, particularly on my laptop, if you're on YouTube, doesn't pick it up particularly easily. So you can see how that's gone. That's a more blue toned than in the picture. This is a little bit too red in colour. So what we're going to do is, in order to pick up on that turquoisey tealy vibe, and these are bits and pieces that are left over from when I've been dyeing the seasonal changes packs this morning, I'm actually going to measure out a smaller quantity of turquoise. What have we got there? Right, let's add that in. So the turquoise colour is quite a strong, vibrant colour. Because I just need to make that purple a little bit less red and a little bit more purple. Let's make sure you're clean. So basically we're just carry on working through like that, just making subtle little colour tweaks until we get to the point where I'm happy. So that's the original colour there. It's far too red. And then we've just added a little bit of turquoise and we've made it into a slightly more purple colour. So I think we're good with that. So let's write in the colour that I added, which is the turquoise. So these are all acid dyes designed for using on fibre. I pre-mix them up into stock solutions because it means that you can put them together into colour palettes. Well, you can mix them really, really easily without needing to measure out microscopic quantities of dye powder. Right, the next colour we would be dyeing would be this one in the middle, which is the tealy green. That's the one that I'm going to leave out because otherwise we're into a colour palette that's got 3 very, very dark colours. We've already got 2. I don't want to add a third one in. So I'm going to jump along to that green and we're going to do that one. And then we're going to do a minty green. And then I'm going to make a decision about what colour I add in next, whether I change it to be a purple or whether I keep this pale grey neutral. But we're not going to do this middle colour here because it's too dark. It's going to be too similar to the 2 other colours. So we're just going to fractionally make it ever so slightly lighter. So I'm going to start off with, it is a green, but it's got some grey and sort of almost some browny undertones in. Let's go for 1, 2. Right, so this is my bright jade green dye. I'm going to put a dot of it on there just so you can see what it is by itself. It's a really lovely colour and works really well as a basis for mixing lots and lots of other shades of green from it. But it's too vibrant and too bright just for this by itself. So what I'm actually going to do is we're going to put a tiny little bit of black in it. Too black. And also a little bit of brown because I just need to tone it down fractionally. It's just too vibrant for what we want, because I am going to do a more vibrant green. So that's where we are so far. So that was the original. This is the toned down version. It's still got a little bit too much green to it. I would like to make it ever so slightly more muted. So we're going to add a little bit more black. That's starting to look more like it. Remember, these colours always look darker because they're wet. And they're also quite concentrated as well because I've not diluted this down with any water yet. So we've made, again, cameras are hard to see. We've just taken the edge off it slightly. So this is the more vibrant one. That's then the colour that's just been made into fractionally more muted. And that's going to be, that I think is going to be a pretty good match for where we want to get to with that one. So I'm happy with that. Right. This is where I think we're going to deviate from the colour palette slightly. We want that really, really light pale green that's in the picture. So we've got this colour. That's helpful on this day. We've got that real bright effect of light. And it's always hard to do that when you're looking at it on fibre compared to the colour on a screen, because that's light coming towards your eyes, whereas actually the device is emitting light and it makes it seem really bright. Whereas when it's in fibre form, it always looks flatter. It's one of those reasons why felt makers love putting silk onto their pictures so much for areas of real that catch the light. They have much more reflections coming off them and they give the feeling of that much brighter, lighter, brighter colour. And that's sort of what we need to do here. Right. Have I managed to fill up every single measuring jug? Oh, no, I didn't. I'll put them in here. Yeah, I did a really good job tidying up before I stopped work for Christmas. But as a result, nothing's in quite the right place because everything got cleaned and tidied and organised. So we are going to go for, let's try 5 of just the plain jade by itself. And I've diluted that down with water because I need to mimic the effect of it being paler and the dye being more spread out on the fibre. So that's going to give us something like that. So can you see how we're getting these tonal contrasts? So it's this colour here. So those two colours, if you make them too similar, as soon as you start trying to use them together, they'd be a real pain because they just wouldn't look different enough. And I think that jade by itself actually works really well in that particular colour palette. What I've got to decide next is whether we go for, we need one more colour, and I need to decide whether to keep the original silver grey or whether to go off-piste again. And you've picked the image and I've kind of changed nearly 50% of the colours in it. Whether we go for another purple or another shade of green. I think I might keep that shade of grey actually, because again, that's giving us, that's going to act as our mid-tone in this, and it's going to hopefully contrast with every single other colour quite nicely. So that's my thought process behind it. Let's find. Yep, that's cleaned out. So I'm going to go for some grey dye. So as I said, the grey dye that I use is by itself is very, very blue. It's actually too blue. Make sure I've not got any air in there. I need some more dye. So I don't need the full amount that comes out of the dispenser, so I'm using syringes to measure it out. If I leave just this blue by this grey by itself, it looks like a shade of blue. Some on there so that you can see. So it's this one here on the right hand side, and it's just too blue for the effect that we're after here. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to put the tiniest amount. I used 10 of grey, didn't I? So this is what happens when I start talking, is that I forget to write anything down. I have to watch this back. If anybody can remember seeing how much of the, if I said how much of the jade green I was measuring out, please tell me, because I've forgotten. Otherwise, I'm going to have to watch it back and hope that I can remember for that very palest colour, because I've got to write it down. Right, we had 10 of the grey and 5, no, not 5, 1 of the jade. Let's have a look and see what we have with that. So I'm just putting in the tiniest amount of that jade green just to stop this grey from being too blue toned. And it won't look like much, but it will actually make, because it's now 10 parts grey to 1 part green, and it's just shifted it over slightly. So I'm just going to have a quick check and make sure that I'm happy with the blue and the purple. I think the purple might need some more of the turquoise going into it. It's still too red toned for this. It just looks a bit off. So we're going to stick in another 5. Oh, it's so hard to tell. What I might end up doing with this one is that sometimes I dye it, let it all heat set, let it dry, and then I take a look at it and make a decision. So I'm back in the studio again tomorrow because I've got just more fibre to dye, because lots sold over the Christmas holidays. And I'm actually starting to get ready for Wonderwool Wales. So starting to think about the stock I need for that. So lots of dyeing going on. So I'm probably going to put the colours that I've just mixed onto fibre. I will let them heat set, which sometimes shifts the colours ever so slightly. I'll rinse them and then make a decision based upon that. And sometimes I go back in and reformulate one of the colours, because it might be I've started off at the wrong point. So for like this purple, I'm not sure. It might have too much black in it, or it might be that the blue's wrong and I need to go back and remix the blue. But until I've kind of put them on fibre, it gets to the point where you can't really tell whether it's going to work as a colour palette. I like the greys and the greens we've mixed. It's the dark colours that are, they're just, I don't know, they don't quite seem right, but it might also be the mood that I'm in. So everyone goes, so what do you do for a job? It's like, well, I dye fibre for a living, and sort of I have yeah, my professional insurance is via an artist and craftsperson association. And so I say, well, it's not just a technical job of putting dye onto fibre, because if it was, I wouldn't have to think so hard. Whereas actually this requires quite a lot of thought, possibly more thought for the second day back at work in January, but we shall see what we've come up with. So this is the grey with the tiniest hint of green in it. Hopefully it's got enough green in it, but not too much. Again, sometimes colours just shift slightly when the heat set. Everything always looks paler when it's dry. So these are going on to Cambrian wool, which is the blue face Leicester crossed with Welsh Mountain, which is sort of nice, versatile Welsh wool, soft but not too soft, spins really nicely, works great for colour work. And it went in to soak yesterday, so that's had the dye evenly spread throughout. Then has citric acid on, which is what gives these dyes their name, because they need acidic conditions to bond onto the wool. And it's then being rolled up nice and tightly. And these will go into the oven to heat set until they are done. I've managed to fill half my working space. I'll put you there for now. So that's the pale grey. But yeah, so these can heat set whilst I'm weighing out the fibre to dye for tomorrow. Find the end. Okay, there we go. So these just get as much water squeezed out as you possibly can, and then laid out flat for the dye to get poured on. That's the very pale jadey green, the one that I'm not quite sure how much I've used. I need to watch back and work it out. It's either 5 or 10, and I can't remember which. Worst case scenario is tomorrow I'll dye one with, and make sure I write it down. And if it matches, I'll know I've got the right amount. And if it's paler or darker, I'll know it's the other one. Because I know it's not as much as 20. I just don't know if it was 5 or if it was 10. Oh. Right, that's all nicely spread out. So the citric acid goes on, and it's quite funny with these turquoisey green colours on. When you put the citric acid on, they sort of shift colour slightly, but it doesn't last. As soon as they get heated up, it changes again. So it's one of those things that makes judging colour sometimes quite, what colour are you going to end up? So it needs to be wrapped up again. So I think this colour actually, holding that. It's actually going to work really nicely with the December pack for anybody who wanted sort of more of a extended colour palette. I'll grab a December pack in a minute to show you. So, because that had some purples and turquoisey blues. Yeah, so it was another pinky purple jadey one. So yeah, for the February colour will not have pinky purple, will not be purpley jadey. There won't be an option there to choose it, because if you're not a purpley jadey person, you've had packs 2 months in a row which are not your sort of colour vibe. Right, so this is the mid-toned green, so I've just put a little bit of water in there just to mean that there's enough liquid there to spread out the dye. Looks like my washing up liquid exploded into the soap bucket yesterday. So I always put you always put a little bit of detergent into the soap water, just because it means if there's any spinning grease left in the fibres or just any bits of dirt, it just helps things get wetter more quickly, because wool's naturally quite water repellent. And I obviously squirted a bit too hard, because they're all quite foamy today. But it doesn't matter, it doesn't affect the fibre. But if anybody's wondering why it's sounding squelchy, that's why. But you can see quite nicely on that, you can see where the citric acid goes on, how it sort of shifts the colour. I'm dripping everywhere. Okay, that's had its citric acid worked in. 1, 2, 3. I'm disliking these slightly less now though on the fibre. I was having on the kitchen roll, I wasn't feeling the love for them just now. But on the fibre they look better. One of those, sometimes you've just kind of got to trust the process. Bits of fibre got tangled up in the bucket because of the last bits that are in there. Because I say this is the last bit of dyeing for today. It's only been a part day in the studio, just to switch everything back on again and remind myself of what to do. So, right, this is the blue. This is the blue that may not be the right colour blue. We'll see. I'm wondering if it's too blue, actually. But that's kind of why I always say to people that the inspiration pictures are colour vibes, not exact, I am going to dye these colours, because sometimes it just doesn't work out that way. They either don't work on fibre form, or just there's better colours pop up. Oh yeah, somebody on YouTube has very kindly gone, it was only 5 millilitres of the light greens. Thank you, Sue. I'm glad somebody's head is working better than mine. But yeah, so yeah, and Andrea's said as well on YouTube that by it being her 3rd day back at work and that her brain's not quite caught up with everything yet. Yeah. I planned it quite nicely for myself through January, actually. Apart from, I don't think I've got a full 5 days in work for the entire month, because I'm off doing dog competitions on pretty much, I think, one day every single week for all the way through until the beginning of February, which is quite, in a way, it's quite nice because I've not got to sort of, I can condense the work week down a little bit. As I'm teaching online on a Saturday, so that sort of takes up one of the days, but it kind of breaks up the monotony and the pattern of. I was just chatting in a group of my friends in our WhatsApp group. I think lots of us have got particularly the weather we've just had, they've got the January blues. Whereas actually I've got things I'm looking forward to doing, and the weather's been horrible. Didn't mind going back to work yesterday at all because it was still raining and manky. But things have brightened up a little bit today. But yeah, and as I say, I've got next week. I know I've already got a 4-day week, and then I can go and do something fun and interesting with Nellie. We've got a competition at a horse riding eventing yard. So lots and lots of big scary horses about while she's working, which is good. Right, this is the last colour, and again, I don't hate it as much as I did when it was on the kitchen roll. So, which is another. Oh, it's funny how you can sometimes just talk yourself out of making a decision. You can start to faff, and you can start to let perfection override the process. But I think adding in that extra dose of turquoise was a good idea, because I think it has definitely made it more dark purple than it was. It was a little bit too burgundy coloured, and I really like the darkness of that one. I think the one that might not work might be the blue now, looking at it in hindsight. But I'm going to, now the dye is on the fibre, we'll heat set them all and we'll make a decision after that. So here's where we've ended up. So remember, these are all darker than they will end up. They're also not quite the right colour, because that's what the citric acid does, is it shifts these greeny tones ever so slightly. So we've got a dark blue, a dark purple, mid-tone green, a very pale green, and the grey. I'm going to go and grab, like my hands clean, one of the packs from, oh, this is where it could all go wrong because I've got to squeeze through a gap. So this was the sparkling baubles from last month. So you can kind of see why I'm going, you could put that and that together. I'm not going to try and hold everything up, it's going to go really badly wrong. And you'd have quite a nice extended colour palette. And I think that would work quite nicely for anybody who bought some of last time's or who didn't. So I say these will get heat set this afternoon. Hopefully will be cool enough for me to rinse later on today. And I will take a look at them and decide whether I need to change any of the recipes tomorrow. And probably won't be online until the beginning of next week. I wouldn't have thought I'll get them dry for tomorrow, ready to photo. The first place I always post about them is in the Fellowship of Yarn. If you're watching on YouTube, it's in the video description link. If you're watching on Instagram, if you go onto my profile, there's a link tree thing and it's listed in there as like the Hilltop Cloud community space. So when they are ready, I post the first batch in there, and then, but I'll keep dyeing them throughout the rest of the month. If you desperately fall in love with some and they've sold out, it's always worth sending me an email to say, could I have X, Y, and Z from the next batch? Because if you want 3 from the next batch, say, what I'll do is I'll dye double that to make sure that there's then, it doesn't sell out immediately for anybody else who's just casually shopping. I hope you'll start back to work if you've not done it yet. It's gone slightly, your brain is in slightly more of a gear than mine is. If it was a bit chaotic today, I do apologise. I'm normally slightly more on the ball. But but often not. We'll be back in February to dye the February colour palette, and the colour choices for that will be up in the Fellowship of Yarn later this month. I hope you will have as lovely a January. I hope too many of you aren't flooded out from wherever you are living. And I shall see you all again soon. And there. And ooh. And now. There we go.